Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
What's up? Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast. This is the College Football Edition, and I'm your host, Tom Dougherty. In this episode, we're going to be talking a couple things about college football. We obviously are in the midst of spring football going on right now across the country. We had a slate of spring football games over the weekend that I went over on Friday during our latest football edition, which was last Friday. Go take a listen if you haven't done that yet. But also we have a little bit of draft shakeup. I know we can talk about, this is the time of the year where I can actually talk about some NFL teams as well as the college teams because of the draft coming up. We are now, I believe, is the 9th, so we are under 20 days away from the NFL draft coming up at the end of this month in Dallas. So we're going to start off our first segment probably talking about that for a little bit. Some of the shakeups that's going on now down with the trades, some possible trades might be happening, some things that are speculated and things that are still on the table. The fact that the Browns haven't really identified a quarterback that they deem worthy of the number one pick, even though it should be Sam Darnold, but that's the Browns. And then throughout the show, we're going to talk about different reports from some of our favorite schools, spring football camps. We're going to go over a team from the Big Ten. We're going to go over a team from the SEC and a team from the, I believe, either the ACC or the Big 12. I haven't decided yet. There's teams all over the place, and maybe even the Pac-12. We're going to do everything today. We're going to go across the country today on the GSMC Football Podcast, the College Football Edition, of course, and that's hosted by me, Tom Dougherty. So, starting off with the draft. We have some reports coming out saying that, like I said, the Browns have not decided what they want to do with the first pick. Obviously, they still have the fourth pick. We've talked about that a lot, Ignesium, over the last week with in our College Football Edition shows. The fact that they can also pick another player at 4, whether it's a quarterback or not, and whether they want to maybe fleece a team with some picks. The Patriots, as many of you have probably paid attention to, have now traded into the first round and gotten another first-round pick as they got the pick from the Rams for sending Mr. Who was the receiver they sent over to the Rams? Why am I drawing a blank right now? They sent a receiver to the Rams. It'll come to my mind in just a second. But they sent a receiver over to the Rams for the 23rd pick to get. I think now they're going to have 4 picks within the first 64 picks. I think they're going to have 4 picks. So, and then obviously they still have Gronk, who is on the last season probably of either his career or of his career, at least with the Patriots. Brandon Cooks. There we go. Just thought of it. Brandon Cooks. Send Brandon Cooks over to the Rams for that 23rd pick. Why not trade those picks and Gronk for the first pick? I mean, if you're Bill Belichick, you have never, and I mean never, started the season without a backup plan at quarterback. And usually Bill Belichick is the guy who gets that young guy. I mean, you have Matt Castle, you had Jimmy Garoppolo, you had Jacoby Brissett. I mean, Ryan Mallett, and now you got Tom Brady, the GOAT, who is sitting at 40 years old. You got a 40-year-old quarterback, Tom Brady, who's probably at 1, 2, maybe 3 years left in the league. I don't know if you guys watched that Tom versus Time thing, but his wife, his beautiful wife Giselle, is getting on him a little bit. because she thinks that he's taking too many hits to the head, too many hits over the place. He's obviously taking very good care of his body, but it's the NFL. I mean, you can only do so much regarding taking hits to your sensitive areas, especially the head, and getting those concussions. Brady has had a share of those. So, if you're Belichick, do you entertain possibly calling Mr. Dorsey, your friend over in Cleveland, and saying, "Hey, I got all these picks. Why don't we make a trade? Get up to number 1. Take Sam Darnold." Because I know the Patriots like Sam Darnold. They've already come out and say they like Sam Darnold. And imagine that, having Sam Darnold, the highly touted quarterback out of UFC, who has been deemed by many the best quarterback prospect in this draft, and getting him over in New England. And then if you're the Browns, you're going to get all those picks back from the Patriots. You're going to probably maybe even get Gronk if you ask for him, because he's expendable. If you're the Patriots, I believe they play just as fine with him as they do without him. As you can look at the stats, you can look at the record. They do, and you could possibly pick a quarterback at 4 if you're the Browns. I mean, you can get Gronk, you can get all those picks, and pick a quarterback still at 4, because the Giants, they haven't decided what they're going to do yet. They don't know if they like Sam Darnold or if they like Rosen. The Jets have said some stuff about Baker Mayfield, even though I think Rosen or Allen probably be a better fit in those conditions of that stadium. And then at 4, you could still take the quarterback that's there, because I mean you haven't decided which one you think is best yet, or at least you haven't let us know, because I don't think they know. I mean, if you are the Browns, you should know Sam Darnold's number 1, because I mean, look what Sam Darnold did. He got a call from his buddy. I've talked about him before on the show, Ronald Jones, another receiver who's coming out of the draft, and he was at I think he was going out to do a workout for the Browns, got on a plane, went back to California, got up in the early morning and went and threw passes to Ronald Jones and did a workout for him in front of scouts that have already seen Sam Darnold and already been wowed by Sam Darnold. I mean, he did that for his buddy, dropped everything and flew across country in order to do that for his buddy. So if you're the Patriots, or if you're the Browns, if you're unsure, you want to get some more picks. I mean, the Browns, they need some picks. They have obviously the first 2 in the first round, but it kind of drops off after that. Regarding draft picks in the later rounds, I mean, we've talked about it before. You can read about it too. The fact that these first round picks are there because of the fact that they are maybe commodities. They're an immediate team need. However, the second and third round picks are where you get your value. It's not, you don't spend the money, and that's really what draft position means, is how much money you got to pay these guys at the beginning. You get these bonuses that are all staggered out and I'll just put out depending on where they're drafted, what draft number each draft number has a price attached to it. So that's where you can get your value. And if you're the Browns, maybe trade that first pick, get all those picks from the Patriots, and maybe even get Gronk. You still have your 4th pick. You still have the 4th pick. You can get a quarterback, and then you can work on building your roster later in the draft, which is what you've seen a lot of teams do, a lot of competitive teams do over the last over a long time, actually, not even the last few years, a long time, over decades. And you can see they could pick out lots of very solid NFL players that were not first round picks or even late round first picks. So that's an idea for the Browns, but. Continue with the draft. I mean, that's a little bit of a shakeup. Obviously, we think about some more trades that can happen. We're probably going to see Buffalo trade up. We might see Arizona trade up further. They have already. You might see the Broncos trade back. I mean, I think the Broncos, if they want to get a quarterback, they might want to just sit where they are and see if Josh Allen falls to them, because Josh Allen in the Mile High City would be quite a sight to see. It'd be quite interesting, because I mean, his ball already flies 90 yards. I mean, but the thing is, you have people who are just so wary of the fact that he can't actually spot a ball on a target and get it to the receiver in an intermediate route. or whether it's, a sideline route or angle route over the middle to the running back, wheel route over the top to the running back. He needs to definitely develop that touch and feel, and who better than John Elway to be not only his general manager, but could be a little bit of a mentor to Josh Allen, and see if he drops to 5 or if Josh Rosen drops to 5. Because, that's the thing about this. We have a very deep, it's a deep quarterback draft. I think I've said even before, it's an even deeper running back draft. But we're seeing reports left and right about, Saquon Barkley number 1. We don't know which quarterback the Browns like. We don't know which quarterback the Giants like. We know the Jets kind of like Baker Mayfield. We don't really know where everything's going to go. And that's the best part of the draft is that, I remember when the Colts were going to draft Andrew Luck, and they came out I think either the day before or the 2 days before the draft, we're picking Andrew Luck. It's already done. Don't even there's no hype, there's no question marks. that was pretty much already decided before that, anyways. So that you have to be definitely be excited the fact that this season we're going to have some question marks coming into the draft, and maybe a little bit of shakeups, a little trades coming either on draft day or on the days coming up to the draft, which is coming up sooner and sooner every day, because it is obviously at the end of this month. It's going to be, I believe, the Thursday, the 26th, live from Dallas Cowboys Stadium in Arlington. The first draft we're going to have in a stadium, which is going to be quite a party there. I'm sure Jerry Jones is going to set up something pretty nice there for the incoming rookie class of 2018, and we're going to see a lot of quarterbacks go early, likely, but you never know. The NFL draft, the thing is that teams get spooked. You got rookie GMs, you got GMs that don't know. You have you do all this research. Go watch that. I know it's a fictional movie, but if you want to, just a little idea of the draft and how crazy it can be, go watch that Draft Day movie with Kevin Costner. The guy turned we turned 1 pick into 3 picks or something like that, or 3 guys. These teams, they find deals left and right. Not last year you had the Niners at 2, trade back 1 spot and get 3 picks for it, because the Bears were just afraid the Niners were going to trade that second pick to a team that also wanted Mitchell Trubisky. The Niners had no intention of drafting Mitchell Trubisky. They were not going to draft him. They were not going to be you better trade with us or we're going to pick him. No, that wasn't what it was. It was, we're going to trade with somebody else. This is the offer they gave us. And if you don't better their offer, we're going to trade with them. And they're going to get Mitchell Trubisky, and you're not. You got to move up 1 spot. So, that's kind of how it works, and that's how it's going to be working this season or this year, likely as well, with a lot of teams clamoring for those quarterbacks up front. Whether they're going to wait for them to drop or they're going to come up and get them is what remains to be seen. There's also some other stuff going on with the other picks. Bradley Chubb, we'll see where he goes if the Giants want to get a defensive back or defensive end, or if he's going to drop to 4 and then maybe the Cleveland grabs him. I think I still like, the fact that, when I read that report saying that those Patriots were possibly talking about doing that trade with the Browns, or it's still on the table, not been reported yet, but it's a possibility that it could happen. They have all those picks, been loading up for those picks. I don't think they're loading up the picks to get Odell Beckham. You could tell me that. I could tell you that right now. But to load up those picks to trade with the Browns, a team I've done a lot of deals with. They just got that receiver from Bills, Matthews, trying to load up their passing game, their receiver core after losing it over the offseason. They need to get a backup for Brady. You've never seen Belichick start a season without a younger backup plan for Tom Brady, and then they needed, obviously, what better to get a guy who's not say a Ryan Mallett, he wasn't that highly touted of a prospect coming out of college. Neither was Matt Castle. Jimmy Garoppolo he was seen as kind of a guy who could take over a team and be the starter, but not a guy who was just going to be a backup, a guy who you can put behind Tom Brady and groom to be your next starter. That's the point you need right now, and that's Sam Darnold coming out of USC. And just imagine if he was able to get into a Patriots uniform and get behind Tom Brady for either whatever amount of years it is, 2-3 years, 1 in my mind year behind Tom Brady. and then be starting under, whether it's under Bill Belichick as the head coach or if Josh McDaniels takes over in the next few years here, as maybe Brady and Belichick leave at the same time. We don't know. It's a mystery out there in New England, but it's definitely a possibility. They've made the moves. They positioned themselves in order to offer John Dorsey quite the package for number one, and he can be a little more free thinking with that, because he's not just giving up his only pick. He has that fourth pick, and they can still get a quarterback if they're not totally 100% sure on Sam Darnold, which, I mean, gosh, at this point, they should be sure with Sam Darnold. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, the fact that they haven't been able to make a decision yet on him, sitting there at number one, and he just is looking really good. I mean, you could already see he's got the skills, got the ability with the body type and the strength to do it. And then also, look at that, he's going flying cross country, getting up at the crack of dawn to go help out his old teammate there at SC. So it definitely looked like he's got the character needed to be a successful NFL quarterback. All right, so that's our first segment. We talked a lot about the draft and stuff like that is obviously coming up. We're going to be talking about draft pretty much all the way up till the day it's going to happen. We'll probably even talk about it the day after the first round on that Friday. We're definitely going to talk about it, because that's the day after the first round. We'll be talking about those quarterbacks and where they went. Coming up for the next segment, we're going to go over different news from spring football and different perspectives for each conference, and what I think each team is going to be doing, and which team's going to have a bounce back year, which team's going to have a regression year, and how they're going to be looking coming up this fall. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. This is the College Football Edition. In the first segment of this College Football Edition, we talked about some shakeups in the NFL draft regarding maybe some trades are coming up in this draft. Maybe some Patriots getting up in the first round, getting a quarterback. Or deeper up in the first round to get a quarterback. They've already gotten those picks from, I believe, the Rams. Obviously, they had their picks, so now they have 2 picks in the first round. Looking maybe to find their successor to Tom Brady. This is a deep quarterback draft, where they're going to try and maybe offer a little package deal to the Browns for the first pick to get a guy like Sam Darnold, or they're going to just sit where they are and maybe see if somebody else falls to them. I don't know. The guy from Toledo is going to really wow Bill Belichick as a guy to put behind Brady, but there's definitely some people to talk about. You could even think about Josh Rosen going there. So lots of stuff to think about when it comes to the draft. There'll be more and more stories and more things to talk about as we get even closer and closer and closer to draft day and the first round, which now is only all standalone. So, on that Friday after the first round, we're going to basically be talking about that a lot. On that show, you can expect that coming up in a couple weeks, but we'll have more and more draft stuff to talk about as we get closer to that day. As of now, we have some more college football news, some spring football stuff going on. This segment, I want to talk about not the Michigan team, but the Michigan State team. As Michigan State, they were a team that they had an interesting season last year. They beat Michigan, number one, in the interstate rivalry there. They beat Penn State, but they did lose to Minnesota. So, they have had an up and down season. They had some issues, obviously, over the offseason with their reports coming out with the sexual assault allegations. that were surrounding both the football and the basketball team. The players that were involved in that are still dealing with that in that court process. Last year, though, they were 10-3, another 10-win season for Coach D'Antonio, and just some interesting thoughts is that we have had reports coming out that they're going to be even better than they were last year. They're eons. I mean, the coach has been saying they're eons away from where they were last year, as though they were so volatile and so up and down. They seem to be much more on point this year. I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see how they're going to get through the Big Ten and how they're going to deal with a Ohio State team that just always is vaunted. I mean, they're going to be coming back with a new quarterback as JT Barrett is gone. But then the fact that they get to play Michigan every year, obviously, I think they're going to be playing at home this year against Michigan. And Michigan is just another team. We're going to talk about the Big Ten here in this segment, along with the Michigan State just kind of being that point school. But Michigan hasn't really been able to figure out their offense when it comes to Jim Harbaugh. He's always been he's a quarterback guy, played quarterback in the NFL, drafted Colin Kaepernick, turned him into the player that we know him, or at least that he was in the NFL, took a team to the Super Bowl. But it's just interesting to see that he hasn't been able to find that guy yet in Ann Arbor to get his team behind and to lead to possibly a conference title or to maybe even a national championship. But he's got a lot of time there in Michigan. Jim Harbaugh does. No rush there, I don't think, because he's got some serious job security over there. But across the state in East Lansing, it's a team that I feel like is going to be having an upstart season. I mean, after finishing, I believe, third in their conference last season, they were in the Big Ten East. They finished third, right ahead of Michigan and behind Penn State and Ohio State. That's the vaunted conference there, the Big Ten East. I mean, you got Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, Indiana. I mean, the bottom three schools aren't really that much of a contest, but versus the other side where you basically just have Northwestern and Wisconsin. Northwestern had a nice little season last year, didn't they? We'll see how they can bounce back this season. It's going to be interesting to see. They didn't lose many starters, but regarding Wisconsin, also, if we're going to keep talking about the Big Ten, they had a pretty easy schedule last year. I don't know. Let's see what their schedule is going to be this year coming up. They definitely were going to be had a little easy schedule. They played Northwestern at home. They played Purdue at home. They only really had the only real big road game was Miami, and that was the Orange Bowl. Just kidding. The only real road game that was worthwhile was Minnesota, and they shut them out in St. Paul. So, I mean, nothing really to note there on the Wisconsin schedule from last year, which is why they didn't get the favorable ranking that they wanted it after coming through. I believe they only lost one game. Really undefeated. Who beat them last year? Ohio State beat them. That's right. In their last game at home, they lost to Ohio State. If they had beaten Ohio State, they probably would have got into the college football playoff, being an undefeated team and beating Ohio State. But they couldn't beat Ohio State at home. So bouncing back this season, probably not with quite the easiest schedule they're going to have. They're probably not going to play Michigan at home. They're probably going to have to go to Michigan State. I don't know if they've had the schedules come out for this coming season for each team. But definitely looking like this Big Ten is going to either shake up regarding definitely a situation with Penn State. They have Trace McSorley, but no more Saquon Barkley. We talked plenty about Saquon Barkley and the fact that he's going to be gone and going over to the NFL. But Penn State, always with John Franklin, going to be competitive. Now they have all their no longer under sanction. They're going to have all their other scholarships and stuff to do when it comes to recruitment. John Franklin is one of those good recruiters in a good little program up there in State College, Pennsylvania. So it's just going to be interesting to see how this Big Ten shakes out and how if we're going to see maybe an upstart Michigan State team kind of get better than they were when it comes to the volatility last year. They did have a stunning victories against certain. I mean, they didn't. I mean, I wouldn't call the Michigan game stunning because that's just how bad, or I wouldn't call them bad, but just mediocre. Michigan was last year, 8-5. I mean, that's nothing to write home about if you're Jim Harbaugh. I mean, that's not where you were hired for. But I mean, like I talked about, he's got some serious job security, and obviously last year they had some issues when it comes to injuries and their quarterback play. They're always going to have that defense. But Michigan State looking like they're going to be a team that can come out of the gates well. They're going to be better than last year. They had their spring football game this last Saturday. It looked like the offense was coming out firing. They beat the defense. I mean, they did have fans and marching and everybody out there. I love those spring football games. The thing about spring football games is that you have all the players out there. I mean, you have fans out there. It's like a real game, but you're playing yourself. I mean, it's the offense versus the defense usually. And or maybe even if you have a big enough program, if you have enough kids out there, you can field two squads of each, and you can do like a green versus white game where you have two offenses and two defenses rolling against each other. But some of these schools don't even do that, where they're just going to run the offense against the defense, and then take a little breathers and go again on some more drives. So D'Antonio. I mean, the thing is, they're coming off after a terrible season the year before, a pretty surprising season last year, and then this year they even feel even more confident going into the season. So if you're a Michigan State fan, I know I have some friends up there in East Lansing going to Michigan State. So I mean, they're definitely excited for this coming season, and looking like they're going to probably beat Michigan again this year, and maybe even compete a little better against Ohio State coming off last year where they got pretty much obliterated. And then looking like maybe they can compete with a Penn State team that might regress a little bit. Also, a Wisconsin team. I don't think they play. We'll see if they play Wisconsin. They have the schedules out for this coming season. I mean, we are so far, but it's only April, friends. It's only April, but we're still talking about some college football stories, because football is pretty much year round. Especially, I mean, I can only talk draft so much because the draft is exhausting, honestly. But we definitely have some spring football stuff to talk about. Michigan State, I'm gonna make that Ohio State is definitely the favorite coming into the season in the Big Ten, as they usually are. Penn State losing Saquon Barkley. I know Ohio State losing JT Barrett, but if there's a recruiter out there that's gonna be able to just take away that uncertainty, it's definitely Urban Meyer. I mean, they have a graduate transfer and they have a redshirt sophomore coming into battle to replace JT Barrett. I mean, it's Joe Burrow and Joanne Haskins. I mean, it's just what's going to look like. They're going to be battling out all spring, and we'll find out. Definitely, one of them will probably become a household name, just like JT Barrett did when we come this fall. Obviously, when the season comes around, that's what we're talking about. College football starts in September, in August. So we're going to be able to be talking about them as we always do when it comes to big schools and our favorite conferences, the big conferences here on the college football edition of this football podcast, because that's what we like to talk about, is what's going on in the big realm thing. I'll find some small stuff to talk about. Believe me, I'll find my little hidden gems. I'll find the bad beats. I'll find everything that we like to see. I mean, we'll try and span the country when it comes to this show and all this stuff we're gonna bring up. But I mean, obviously we have our Power 5 conferences for a reason, friends. Right now we're talking about Big Ten and the fact that, I mean, Ohio State is still deciding what they want their quarterback to be. Michigan State looking like they're going to have a bounce back here. Nebraska needs to figure out who their quarterback's going to be. Penn State, they need to get their defense all lined up and figure it out for this coming off season. I mean, there's definitely some question marks when it comes to the defense and their middle linebacker, as they lost one to are going to be losing their heart and soul. Jason committed to the draft, so it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to figure out to replacements. I mean, that's what it is in college football. It's a rotating door. You got to basically figure out who is going to be stepping into the shoes of the guy who was a all-world player, or maybe just the leader of your team the year before. I mean, especially when you're talking about Ohio State's and the Penn State's either offense or defense. I mean, JT Barrett was that guy. JT Barrett was the guy. I mean, I know he had some of his shaky games here and there, but he was a guy who stuck around campus. I mean, he was there, I believe. He graduated. I mean, he finished as a senior. He did all of his eligibility as far as he could took that team, had a good national championship team. Obviously, they had the other guy who had come in from. He had with JT Barrett dealing with some injuries, but he was still the lifeblood of that team. I mean, he was the guy who was a leader in the locker room. Definitely a calming force on the sideline for your offense, and a guy who just knew that playbook backwards and forwards. So it's just interesting. We'll see how Urban Meyer gets to deal with the fact that he has to replace a guy like that when it comes to JT Barrett. And then obviously a guy like the over in Penn State, that's what they're hung their hat on. Obviously their offense was pretty dynamic last year with Saquon and Trace McSorley, but their defense was able to keep them in games that the offense wasn't clicking very well, or be able to have some big stops in those games that could be considered shootouts where maybe the defense wasn't playing too well to start off the game, but they came back and late. And then obviously we had those lovely blowouts we always love to see, where both phases of your team, your offense and your defense, are both clicking on firing all cylinders, where your offense is able to put up big points and your defense is holding the opponent to a low score, and you're just able to see your favorite blowout every week. Which, I mean, do we like blowouts? I don't know. Do we like blowouts? I'm not a big blowout person. Blowouts are just stats. Blowouts are just stats. They drive up stats and they just make things storylines less interesting. I mean, basically, we're just talking about people and their performances. Yeah, this guy had 3 touchdowns. Yeah, this guy threw for 350 yards. But where was the competition? Where was the story? I mean, one team blew out the other team. There was no competition. There was really no story. But that's just talking about blowouts. That's just my little opinion on blowouts right there. Okay. So we talked about the Big Ten in that segment. We're going to come back and talk about the SEC in the next segment and talk about some stuff that's going on down in Auburn, over in Georgia, and some of the question marks going around possibly, and what's going to be happening with a team that went to the national championship game last year but did lose. And then, well, of course, we got to talk about a little bit about Alabama. Don't we love Alabama on this show? We talked about Nick Saban a lot. We'll find out about that little sarcasm. But we're going to get there, and I'll be right back with all of that.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA Podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast, the college football edition. In the first 2 segments, we went over the NFL draft coming up in a couple of weeks and of your favorite college players and where they might go, and just a little hot take regarding the fact that the Patriots might trade for the first pick. You never know. They're coming off a Super Bowl loss. Brady's getting old. Belichick has never gone without a contingency plan at quarterback and had a young quarterback in the waiting in the wings behind Brady. And it looks like that they have loaded up some serious picks and could be making a pretty tasty offer to John Dorsey, Bill Belichick's friend, mind you, to get that first pick. So that's what we talked about. And then we also went over the Big Ten and some of the prospectus coming up for the season. Went over some things going down in spring football. Now we're going to turn our time down south to the SEC, the Southeastern Conference. We have reports out that Auburn is definitely dealing with some quarterback injuries. We had Jared Stidham was coming off of a surgery, but we have no concerns. No concerns. Even though the offense had some issues in the spring game, if you could say that for sure. I mean, you have no Jared Stidham. Obviously, you could always refer back to the fact that Cam Newton didn't have the best spring game. But definitely little question marks raising. We talked about that on Friday. The fact that there are definitely some question marks going out all throughout the spring football world regarding the definitely question marks regarding injuries and stuff like that with Auburn and different teams like that, especially Auburn. We talked a lot about Auburn on Friday. Actually, we'll talk about Auburn some more today. But definitely having some question marks and definitely wanting to tone down the maybe the hype or the questioning fans or the fans who aren't unsure. I mean, we are in April, mind you. The fact that we have a long ways off till the season, and we're definitely having. It's fun talking about spring football, but we are not going to get any answers in spring football. We're not going to get any answers in spring football. You're going to get looks at some of your favorite players, maybe getting a little workout. You're going to find out who maybe the breakout star for this season is. Maybe you're going to find out about a freshman that is going to pop in his first season if he gets on the field, or a sophomore that was highly touted out of high school but was redshirted last year, or a guy coming off injury. So obviously Gus Malzahn has been quoted in saying that regarding this little poor showing in the offense for Auburn, that his leader was not out there. Jarrett Stidham was not on the field. Obviously, they have been kind of fleeced in the running back department with Petway and with Vicarion Johnson going to the draft. They have to hold out a couple other players, and there's no concern coming into the spring game for Gus Malzahn, who has been known as a very confident coach, as you could see him on the field. When you see Gus Malzahn on the field, you can definitely see that he's got definitely an air of confidence around him when it comes to his coaching style and his demeanor on the side of the field. Shifting over to Georgia, they definitely have gotten their spring practice going with Kirby Smart coming into his second season as head coach. Got his team to a national championship game in the first season, against obviously coming within one play of winning the whole kit and caboodle there in Atlanta. He's identified a couple concerns coming into spring football regarding their defense, as that was kind of their thing last year. They had the dual-headed quarterback and dual-headed running backs come last year, and then they obviously had the young quarterback in Jake Fromm, but their defense was really good. I mean, they had a really good. I mean, Roquan Smith was the guy who was kind of locking down their front four and the whole interior box. Even their secondary was pretty good. They were ball hawks. They were knocking passes down. They were giving Jalen Hurts fits, obviously, in the national championship game. They were given even in a high scoring game against Oklahoma. They came up in the clutch against Baker Mayfield in that overtime period, due to the fact that they needed to, and they were under some serious pressure when it comes to a guy like Baker Mayfield flinging the ball over the field. But Kirby Smart has definitely identified the fact that these starters in the secondary are an area of concern when it comes to the fact that they just kind of are being a little more lax. I mean, he's been quoted as saying the fact that these guys in position aren't challenging themselves, and they aren't really pushing themselves to learn the playbook and get themselves ready for the season. I mean, you could say that these guys are in college. These guys aren't ready yet because it's April and their season doesn't start till August and September, and they still have training camp come the summertime. But when you're talking about major college football, and when you're talking about the SEC, there's no such thing as being underprepared, or overprepared. Let me rephrase it. There is no such thing as being overprepared in the SEC. When you have to deal with a guy like Nick Saban, when you have now Jimbo Fisher coming over from Florida State to be the coach at Texas A&M, that's now in your conference. You have a team even like Florida, who's going to be getting up there in the ranks now, coming over with getting Dan Mullen, getting over to Florida. You could see Florida popping. They were kind of a team that I thought could have hopped last year, but they had some issues, and they didn't. Obviously, their coach wasn't the guy who they wanted to be in that position. So if you're Georgia and you're coming off of a great year where you were up in the top 5 pretty much all season, and you got to a national championship game, you can't get complacent, and that's the thing with complacency. We see it all the time with sports. I mean, they call it maybe a World Series, a Super Bowl hangover or a championship hangover, regardless of whatever sport it is. You can't have complacency, and whether it's a veteran group back there in the secondary, or even guys who are coming in their first season, you can't be complacent, and you got to be hungry. You got to be ready to go, even in spring football, because that's where you're going to learn all of the tools. When you start from the beginning, you lay a good foundation. There's nowhere to go but up. When you lay a good foundation, you can't regress. You need to be able to start at the beginning well, start off strong, and then just build and build and build from there until you get to the season. That's how you're going to have another season like last year. I mean, obviously Kirby Smart is that defensive guy. He's going to get his defense where he wants it to be. But that's the fact that he's already identifying these kind of issues, is the fact that showing you the kind of coach that he is, because he definitely needs to get these guys going. And when you're going to be competing probably yet again with Alabama, who has now probably found the quarterback of their future in Tua, and I mean, you could say that I've talked about the quarterback controversy with Tua and Jalen Hurts, but let's be honest, Tua won that job back in January when he beat this very Georgia team that I'm talking about. So if you want to get basically a little deja vu, Georgia, keep it where you're going. But if you want to be able to beat Tua and Nick Saban, you better get your stuff together, because the secondary is the very faction of that defense that Tua is going to be picking apart throughout this season, if they see each other during the season, or if they're going to see them in the SEC championship game, or in the I think they're in the same division. So in the probably in the title game, if not again, or maybe if they're the one if they match up correctly in the CFP. We're being really high, really perspective here, high perspectives. But you got to be careful. You're in the SEC. It doesn't mess around. I mean, we've already seen the SEC get up there in the college basketball rankings. They're already college football. Don't mess around. You don't mess around. You got to be able to get your ducks in a row and get all your stuff together. So that's an area of concern for Kirby Smart, is the secondary. Also, his defensive line. Obviously, you lose some players to the draft. You got to be able to. He's kind of the guy who needs to be able to draft. He needs to be able to draft, or not draft, but be able to recruit the kind of talent that can replace and plug and play into that position. And he's the kind of, Kirby Smart is that coach who's that defensive coach where his schemes are going to get you so far, but you need to be able to have that talent and that ability to get to the quarterback, because that's the other thing we're talking about. When it comes to Alabama and Tua, he's a passing quarterback. He can run a little bit, but he's going to be sitting in that pocket, picking apart that secondary. But the thing is, how do you give a little break to your secondary and make it easier on them? You have pass rushers and you have a defensive line who can A, stop the run to make it more obvious that they're passing, and B, get after the quarterback. And those things kind of work hand in hand. I mean, when you're thinking about defense, and I'm sure Kirby Smart thinks about it a lot. It's not simple, but you can simplify it a lot. You can simplify it a lot when it comes to quarterback. When it comes to defense in football, you got to be able to stop the run, and you got to get after the quarterback. And the other things will kind of come. If you can't get after the quarterback, and if you can't stop the run, you're going to have some issues, because guys will get open. These receivers are talented guys out there, especially in the SEC. They're very, very talented. And they're definitely going to be able to get open if they have the time to run around out there. And you're going to put your secondary in a pretty bad position, and you're not going to help them out at all. So you got to be able to get after the quarterback. You got to be able to stop the run. So I mean, if Kirby Smart's having some issues, he's having some issues. The main problem with his program is going to be depth at the defensive line position. He better get those guys and have a stalwart out there who can play maybe every down, or if they're going to have to get a rotation in and go in with a few guys to figure out how they're going to be able to compete and be able to get after the quarterback and stop the run, like I was just talking about. So I mean, they held their first scrimmage. First scrimmage. It was considered upbeat and really good from people who were on the sideline. Kirby Smart was saying that it was about them getting better and better. Obviously, they're a team that's going to be losing some players to the draft, and they're going to be having a new crop, as it is every year. That's what it is. Like we're talking about with college football, it's a kind of a rotating door, and you can't Like, I mean, the NFL kind of is a rotating door too when it comes to free agency and people leaving all the time. But with college football, it's not like you're just deciding to leave or you have these veterans who've been on your team all this time. You have max 5 years. If you got redshirted your freshman year, then you could say that extra fourth year, extra fifth year to get your full 4 years of eligibility. I mean, some of those guys don't even stay that long. The top ones stay maybe 3 years. Say 3 years usually. They can leave after their junior year. So it's interesting to see how these college teams, when it comes to recruiting, and that's why recruiting is so important and so vital to call it the life of college football, and be able to rotate these guys in there and get more talent and get the highest rated guy out of high school, and make sure that your school and your team is definitely stocked well and appealing to the team and the school, both appealing to the highest recruits, to be able to get that depth, because looks like that's what happened. That's what's happening in Georgia. The fact that you're losing some depth on the defensive side there. I mean, the offense, I haven't really seen anything that they're having problems with when it comes to replacing Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb. They're going to have Jake Fromm. They still have Calvin Ridley's brother, who's going to be a nice little receiver out there, who played in the national championship game as well against his brother at Alabama, and is going to be just fine probably on the offensive side for Georgia, as they'll figure that out. Jake Fromm's a really talented quarterback, as you could tell what he did as a true freshman. But that's going to be interesting to see. We got a lot of time to go for it. We got a lot of time to go. They got some time to figure it out down there. Kirby Smart's a good coach. Got his team to the national title game in his first season. Let's see what he does. The second season, we'll probably talk a lot more about them as their spring football season continues on. But Georgia's definitely a compelling story as we continue through this spring football season in the month of August, or month of April, as we work towards the month of August, when we're going to be talking about real games and some real competition. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. We'll be back with some grab bag stuff, some things I think about college football, maybe another conference, some ACC stuff, some Pac-12 stuff. So we'll figure it out as we go along. But that's the fourth segment. We kind of just talk about what I want to talk about, and maybe I'll do some conference champion picks, way too early conference champion picks, and decide what we're going to talk about for the next show. All right.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. This is the college football edition, as we have been talking college football and the draft all day. We're going to finish up the show with some Pac-12 and some ACC news that's been going on, and talk about their spring football camps. We went over the Big Ten and the SEC a little bit there. We're going to talk a little bit Clemson, and maybe we'll get over to the Pac-12 eventually as well. The Pac-12 is interesting. I don't know. They kind of lost their way a little bit. They had the USC team. They're not really a team out there. Maybe Washington and Jake Browning can make a run this year, but there's not really a team out there that's just wowing me right off the bat from just roster size. And over Jake that is going to do probably just fine coming back after that injury last season. He was injured all of last season. He got hurt in that playoff game against Auburn, where Washington they hung in there a little bit, but then eventually figured out the way that was going to go against Alabama. But he's gonna probably be fine out there in the Pacific Northwest, in that Pac-12 North, where he'll face off against the Washington States and the Oregons and the Oregon States, likely play Stanford again, and Cal. But there's nothing really big out there regarding just a big favorite. I'll probably pick one. Washington probably will be that pick when we get to that a little bit later at the end of the show. But this is gonna be interesting because we have a lot of stuff going on. I haven't even gotten to the fact that USC is probably going to have a down year because they've lost Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold carried them so much last year, and we haven't even been able to identify who their quarterback is going to be for next year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. They probably had a bunch of different guys tagged in their spring game and being able to fight for that USC quarterback job. So we're going to talk SEC. I know Clemson is going to be talking about their quarterback. They have the best defensive line in football, but what's going on the other side of the ball regarding quarterback? They had Kelly Bryant last year. I don't know why he wouldn't. Why is there question marks about him coming out this year? But there seems to be some question from his own coach when it comes to Dabo Swinney and the fact that maybe he wants to see a little change. He wants to have Kelly pushed a little bit. Has to see a little competition at quarterback. I like Clemson. Clemson's a great little program. They have their guy in Dabo who's going to just be leading them all the way. So that's what the thing about college football is it's a lot about coaching. That's what you finally saw at USC. They had a little bit of coaching stuff going on with Lane Kiffin, and then with finally getting Clay Helton in there after and little issues with the coach previous before in between those two guys, but and then obviously up there in Washington. So it's a lot about coaches. That's the thing about college sports. I talked about it before. Is it's a lot about coaches and the fact that these coaches are going to be the guys that stick around there. They get paid the big bucks. I've been over my spiel about the college football and the fact that these players should be paid, and the fact that these coaches get paid way too much. And so you got definitely got some question marks out there, but definitely got some more stability when you think about the programs that have coaches that can hold the name and get their teams where they need to be and have had the pedigree in order to do so. We've definitely talked about the coaching carousel. I think we did that in our first or second show. We talked about the fact that we've had a lot of new faces in some new places. So getting back to the SEC, when you think about Clemson, you think about a very loaded roster and a good coach, but it's been about their quarterback. When they had Deshaun Watson, they won a national championship game because Deshaun Watson won the national championship game for them. He used the talent and used the pieces around him to relied on the defense, and then used the talent and used the pieces around him to beat Alabama in the last minute or last second, mind you, and win that title for Clemson. But can Kelly Bryant do that? Can they do that with Kelly Bryant? The fact is the question. They have another guy in Hunter Johnson, and does Dabo really? What does Dabo want to do? That's the biggest question mark I think in the spring for Clemson, is the fact that you have Kelly Bryant and the fact that you have last year with all that talent, and he wasn't really able to break the ice. Getting absolutely mollywopped. They finished. Finishing the season number 1 is great. Getting into that playoff is great, but getting mollywopped by Alabama, they're pretty much the same team that you beat the previous year with Deshaun Watson. And then getting molled up at Alabama, is Kelly Bryant going to be able to be enough? He did not look good at all against the Crimson Tide, who were coming in. They were coming in pretty excited. Obviously, there was a lot of talk about the fact that Alabama wasn't going to make it to the make it into the playoff. That they were going to be that 5th team, that first team out. They were going to put Auburn in there, maybe put a Wisconsin in there, but they put in Alabama. And Alabama showed up. They showed up against Clemson. They avenged that loss against Clemson the year before, and Kelly Bryant wasn't able to do that. So will Dabo think that? After a 26-4 loss to Alabama, that he needs to make a change with this kind of roster and the opportunity that they have to win another title? will be better with Hunter Johnson at quarterback, the sophomore, coming in. Maybe they even have a true freshman by the name. I think his name is Trevor Lawrence. I think his name is. So they have a guy. They have a couple different options for Dabo, a great coach in his own right, to make a decision if he's thinking that Kelly Bryant is not the guy after his pretty awful showing, only putting up 6 points against Alabama, 24-6 loss. He was running for his life around there, but just having to deal with the fact that you were the number 1 team and you're facing a number 4 seed. It's Alabama, but also having to deal with the fact that this is basically the same team that you beat the previous year. It's a different quarterback for Clemson, but it's almost the same team for Alabama, if not a weaker team, because they were obviously they were a lower seed, a 4th seed. And it wasn't even the national championship game; it was the semifinal. So, if you're Dabo Swinney, that's going to raise questions for you, absolutely, for sure. And it's going to make you have to probably just put some pressure on Kelly Bryant. Maybe just tell him, "Hey, you were a guy last year. You were the guy. You're probably still the guy right now, but it's not 100%." Kelly, you got to show out for me in spring. You got to show up for me in practice. You got to show that this is you're refocusing your career, or you're refocusing yourself on this playbook and on this craft of quarterback, because you didn't cut it last year, or didn't cut it last year in the game that mattered, because he got them to the number one ranking in college football. You can't knock Kelly Bryant for that, but the fact that he has all these weapons, one of the best defenses in the league, a lot of playmakers on the offensive side, and then he's got him coming back this season. They got to be able to take advantage of that. And in order to take advantage of that, you got to be able to have a quarterback who can run the offense and manage that offense correctly, because that's basically you're touching the ball every play. And as we know, our football fans know, you can't really do anything without a quarterback, and quarterbacks make the offense go. And they also can take some pressure off the defense by staying on the field long enough to let the defense get some rest and get some better field position for when they give the ball back to the other team. All right. So that's it about the SEC. And then there's some issues that we see down in Clemson. This is a decision for Dabo Swinney to make. In the last few minutes of this show, we're going to go through maybe I said I was going to do it, so let's do it. The way too early conference champions for each of the Power 5 conferences. And we'll start with the Pac-12. I think all of us, the only one I didn't talk about today was the Big 12. And that's kind of it's kind of a little bit of a random pick there in the Big 12, obviously, with Oklahoma losing Baker Mayfield. Might see some surprises out of TCU. They looking all right coming into the season. But I think now we're at every school, every conference having a conference title game. It used to be that the Big 12 did not have a conference title game. They didn't have it for a few years, but now they brought it back. I think last year was their first year they brought it back, and now I think every team, every conference has a title game now. All right. So we'll start in the Big 12, or we'll start in the Pac-12, actually. Start out west, and we'll work our way east. It's going to be a battle. Stanford and Washington going for that Pac-12 North title. In the South, it's kind of a pick-em, because both the two teams that you would like are going to lose their quarterbacks when it comes to USC and UCLA. So, and we don't really know with upcoming players, but with Chip Kelly going to UCLA, I'll take them to win the South and go up against probably Jake Browning. We'll take Jake Browning in the North, and Washington. They'll probably squeak out in front of Stanford in the standings to get into that Pac-12 championship game, I'll say, and we'll take Washington to beat Chip Kelly, and Jake Browning will win that Pac-12 in his senior season. All right, in the Big 12, we gotta take Oklahoma. I'm not even gonna give you a matchup. I like Lincoln Riley. He's a great coach. I mean, you got to think about Scott Frost it's his first season in Nebraska. They got some things to figure out. They got some question marks out there in Lincoln. So I like Scott Frost. And then Lincoln Riley down in Norman in Oklahoma he's in his second year now already. And after taking a team to the CFP College Football Playoff in his first season, replacing Bob Stoops. So I like Oklahoma. In the Big Ten, we'll go with Ohio State. Ohio State's probably going to face off against either Penn State or Wisconsin again in the Big Ten championship game. As you see, that East division is just so stacked. You got those top 4 teams all kind of bundled up there with Michigan State, Ohio State up there as well. So I mean. And Northwestern up there. Actually, no, I think Penn State's in the East Division too. So you got to think, Penn State, Oklahoma State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State are all in the same division. In the West, you basically just got Northwestern and Wisconsin. So Wisconsin will probably get to that final again and lose again to Ohio State. Or lose again to, yeah, they'll just lose again because that's just the way that works in Wisconsin. I mean, we'll see how they do with their little tougher schedule probably this coming season after pretty much a little cakewalk last year. But take Ohio State and they'll figure out that quarterback situation. They just have too much talent in Urban Meyer. You got to like coaches. At this point, you got to pick with coaches and then let coaches lead you. In the ACC, Clemson, they'll figure it out. They're the most talented team. They'll figure out whether they like Kelly Bryant. He'll probably start the season off, and even if they don't, even if he regresses a little bit, they have the guys to put in there for him. I talked about it in just a few minutes ago, but we'll take Clemson. Dabo Swinney, you got to be confident with his abilities to get that team where they want to go and win another conference yet again. And then in the SEC, probably the most question marks, probably the most competition we've seen for Alabama. Now we got Texas A&M with Jimbo Fisher, Florida with Mullen, and then another season for Kirby Smart at Georgia. But I think with Tua and obviously a Nick Saban-led defense is always going to be really good. So with Tua and Alabama, likely Tua being starting there, and then obviously some question marks with Georgia, you got to like the Crimson Tide coming out of the SEC. So that's what I'm going to pick for those conference champions, not quite getting to the national championship or the rankings. So those are my conference. I mean, the thing is, that's the thing about the CFP now these days, is that you have the 4 teams, but there's 5 power conferences, and one conference champion will be left out every year. And last year we didn't even have a conference champion. We had 2 SEC teams, so 2 conference champions actually got left out last year. The Pac-12 champion got left out last year, and the I believe the Big Ten champion got left out last year. So you had Oklahoma and Clemson both won their conference and got in, but then you had the 2 teams from the SEC, which that was probably about right last year. That's probably the way it should have been. But I mean, we'll talk about probably more and more as we continue through the summer about how the expansion of the CFP is either a good or a bad idea. I think 8 teams wouldn't be that bad. It's 1 extra game. Probably wouldn't hurt. I don't think an 8-team thing, and you get maybe all those conference champions get an automatic bid, and then you pick 3 at-large teams to fill in the rest of those last 3 spots. So that's probably where we're going to be headed. It is 1 extra game, but more games means more money for the NCAA. So why wouldn't they like that? I mean, they got to watch out. Player safety is always an issue, and wear and tear of a season. But I mean, they only play 12 games, and likely these guys who are going to be going to the NFL are going to be playing upwards of 16 games, depending on where they go every season. So why not 14 games isn't that much, so in my opinion. So I think that's probably where they're going to be going pretty soon here. I mean, if they play 12 games plus a title game. Well, actually, that'd be a lot. That'd be 15 games actually total if you think about it all the way through for the team that makes it all the way through. If you're thinking about a team, if they're playing 12 regular season games, 13 for the conference championship game, then you're playing 3 playoff games if you win the whole thing, and that's including the championship game. So that'd be 15 or 16 actually, if I can do math correctly. Yeah, that'd probably be a lot. for a college team, but I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that's not the direction we're going. As we continue to be more and more inclusive in the college world, as they're kind of going the way of the college basketball programs and getting into that tournament style. I mean, don't we love that CFP? We do love that CFP. I mean, it's much more inclusive and it just makes it more fun. We've already had our first 4 seed. I mean, Alabama wouldn't have had a chance to win the national championship game last year. We would not have gotten that matchup we got last season with the Georgia-Alabama game. And what a great game it was. And we had those games before it too. The Alabama-Clemson game, not so much, but the Georgia-Oklahoma game was really good. I mean, if it was back to the BCS time, we would have seen a Clemson-Georgia final, just straight out. And Georgia probably would have rolled them. So, I mean, if you're Georgia fans, you probably would have liked that. But you definitely would have liked that. But, I mean, that's not how it is these days. We have a college football playoff and out with the BCS. And it's been like that for, 4 or 5 years now. So, it's old news, and we'll see if we can get an 8th team. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the GSMC Football Podcast, the College Football Edition. I've been your host, Tom Dougherty. Be sure to subscribe to all of our podcast apps all across the platforms and listen to all of our other shows. Make sure you're listening to Jesse's shows. He's going to be doing the football show, non-college, not regular, just football. I'm specifically college football. He's everything. Jesse's show, which is, I think he does it Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we got football every day here on the GSMC Podcast Network. And until my next show on Wednesday, have a good time, and we'll see you then.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.